right, welcome back, everybody. Episode, I think, 13 of the CoHost Myrtle Beach podcast. Today, I've got Jasper Rivers. He is the author and host of Get Paid for Your Pad, another great podcast in the SDR world. He's also the co-founder of a few different companies, Wyld, Overnight Success, and Wyld Foundry, which actually does our revenue management for my management company here in Myrtle Beach. So he's a really awesome guy, very knowledgeable, has a ton of experience. And today I kind of wanted to dive into revenue management and talk about some of the different listing, little marketing tweaks and optimization things you can do for your Airbnb, VRBO, and Booking.com listings, just to make sure you're optimizing them. It's gotten so competitive out there that it's really important to up your game and know what those little strategies are. So Jasper, why don't we get started? Why don't you give a little bit deeper of an intro and just tell us kind of how you got into the STR world?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me, and it's been great working with you over the last few months. Yeah, I kind of randomly got involved with Airbnb pretty early on, back in 2012. I just quit my job as a trader in the finance world, and was planning to travel around for a couple of years, and so I had to find a solution for my apartment back in Amsterdam. And I didn't want to lose control of the apartment by renting it out to like a long-term renter. So I just heard about this new thing, Airbnb. So I figured I'd give it a try, and it worked like magic. I ended up like traveling the world for the next like 6 years, pretty much living off the income that I was generating with this one apartment.
Wow.
And so I realized the power of this platform.
Yeah.
There wasn't much information at the time, so which is why I wrote my book, Get Paid for Your Pad, and I started a podcast to kind of share my experience and help other hosts get started with Airbnb.
Yeah.
And that turned into eventually me and my business partner Eric Myrtle launching a new short-term rental brand called Wyld out of California, Idlewild, California. And we're also in the last year, we've built up another side of that business, which is the revenue management that you are a part of. So, yeah, it's been an exciting journey.
Yeah, that's awesome. Do you still have that apartment that you started with?
No, actually, I actually sold it back in 2017. That Amsterdam came out with some pretty strict rules around short-term rentals, which by now, like every major city probably has some type of regulation in place. But back then when I started, it was kind of like the Wild West. You could kind of do whatever you wanted. No one really knew about Airbnb anyway. So,
right. Yeah.
But yeah, that changed. They restricted it pretty heavily. And so I ended up selling that place.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Regulations are no joke. We've even got some possibly coming to our little beach town here, which is crazy because we're so reliant on tourism and travel and accommodation. So, but that'd be another topic for another episode, just because you can go so deep into that. How did you get into the revenue management and numbers side of things? That seems to be a big focus for you. What got you into that?
Yeah, well, it kind of has to do with my background. Like when I was young, I was always like a numbers person, like a nerd, so to speak. I was always like calculating things, like trying to figure out how to win at blackjack, and calculating, like, even when we were on holiday, I would calculate the average speed of our car and estimated time of arrival. I was always like doing stuff like that. I studied econometrics, which is a combination of economics and statistics and mathematics. Then I went into finance as a trader, so sitting behind screens, just looking at numbers, basically. So yeah, my whole life I've just kind of been obsessed with numbers. And so when I started Airbnb, one of the very first things that I asked myself was like, how do I optimize my pricing? At the time, there was no pricing tools, right? So we were just like putting manual numbers in directly into Airbnb. And very quickly I realized that we had to like change our prices depending on demand, which was a lot of work if you don't have a pricing tool and you don't really have any data to go off of. So it's just more of like, the weekends pricing a little higher, the summer you're pricing higher.
Right.
But then in 2014, the first pricing tool came out, Beyond Pricing, and I think I probably was one of their first users.
Oh, wow.
And so, yeah, so since 2014, I've been using pricing tools to price my own units and, other units that, I was pricing. So, So yeah, I mean, right now there's so many tools and there's so much data and
Mhm.
so many resources that we have for revenue management. But
Yeah.
back then in 2014, it was completely new. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, that was kind of like a natural progression for me.
Okay. Interesting. Were the pricing tools, did they come out like beyond pricing? Was that out before like AirDNA and key data were out? Did it come before those kind of data tools?
Yeah, I want to say AirDNA came out pretty early on,
Mm,
but AirDNA did not have pricing functionality at that point. It was more
mm,
like a research tool,
yep,
like it still is, but
mm,
I believe they have a pricing algorithm now as well.
yep,
But yeah, I remember at the Airbnb Open in 2014, I remember meeting Scott, the founder of AirDNA, and there wasn't a lot of tools available then.
mhm,
Those are
mhm.
really the outside of like some PMS systems that were already there. Beyond pricing, I believe was really the first pricing tool that came on
Mhm.
the market.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I know they're one of the big ones, and then obviously Price Labs, which is what you guys use on the revenue management side, and then Wheelhouses I know is another popular option. Very cool. What
Yeah,
is
absolutely.
obviously you manage a lot of portfolios on the revenue management side. You know, Freewild has how many cabins or properties does Freewild have?
Yeah, so Freewild is a pretty new company.
Mhm,
So what we do is we acquire old kind of like old school vacation rental assets
mhm,
in traditional vacation rental markets, and we turn those into modern experiences.
right.
So we started off in Idlewild. We bought
Mhm,
a couple acres of land there with 4 existing cabins
mhm,
that we currently rent out. We are in the process of approvals with the county to build another 6, so that will bring us
wow,
up to 10.
wow.
Um, and we are actively looking for other properties to acquire. We're currently looking at we currently have an offer out on a property in Big Bear, which is our
Nice.
most kind of like most logical next market for
Mhm,
us as Freewild, as our model is really being a couple hours away from major metropolitan areas,
mhm,
and providing like just a really high level customer experience and high level design type
right.
of experience to people that want to get away for a couple days out of the
Yeah,
city and spend some time in nature. So
yeah.
so yeah, hopefully this year we'll be able to expand into some new markets.
Gotcha. That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah. And I probably should have introduced Free Wild there, but yeah, they have. I would definitely recommend everybody go check out the Free Wild website. They've got some very cool different places that they man different places that you guys own and some places with some really cool design and the one thing I'm trying to implement with our company is kind of like what's unique about us, what's different, and I think you guys obviously do that very well. You have that dialed in very well. What's kind of your outlook on 2025 and
Mm.
what it looks like across the country in terms of occupancy, ADR? Where do you see things kind of going this year?
Yeah, sure. And just to give some context, we currently have 32 portfolios that we manage in different continents. We're
Mm-hmm.
in Europe, we're in Australia, we're in the US, we're in Canada, and we have about 1,200 listings
Wow.
that we manage.
All right.
So yeah, so we have a pretty good idea of like how different markets are performing. I want
Mm-hmm.
to say in general, it's been a pretty weak start to the year. Obviously, there's exceptions, but one trend that we see that's been going on for a while, or I guess it's kind of like a counter trend, because when COVID hit, it completely disrupted travel trends. Right,
Right.
people started traveling during random periods of the year where before people wouldn't really travel. Like, people who travel during the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
long weekends, the tradition, the summer, or the winter when you go skiing. So like the traditional periods to travel, that
Mm-hmm.
was completely shaken up by COVID, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we saw that as because of COVID, some areas suddenly saw demand all year round versus only in the high season, right?
Right.
Now in 2022, that trend started reversing, and so more people started going back to work, like the schools children started going back to schools. So there was still more flexibility, and
Mhm.
obviously the remote working is kind of like a longer steady trend that's happening,
Mhm.
but COVID kind of blew that out of the water,
Right.
and then it reversed back,
Mm.
right? So
Mm.
that reverse is still happening, meaning what we're seeing is like the low season is becoming harder
Mm.
to get booked, right? The
Yep.
demand in the low season is lower. I was just at a conference in Miami a couple of weeks ago, the SDR Forum, and I say that the lower lows and higher highs,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so we got to be really, really aggressive right now in the in the low season. If it's your low season right now, which in most
Mhm.
market it's kind of like a low season,
Mhm.
and you've probably seen that on your portfolio that we've been extremely aggressive
Yep.
with
Yep.
pricing to drive occupancy, because otherwise the units sit empty, and then
Mhm.
right now it's very hard to get momentum on the OTAs because there's so
Mhm.
much competition. So if
Mhm.
you're empty for like a month or two, you're going to struggle to even get bookings for the summer,
Yep.
right? So it's
Yep.
it's really important to drive that occupancy now during the low season. So that's one trend that we're seeing, like a reversal of traditional travel trends. As far as like the expectations for 2025, it looks like, I mean, since the end of 2022, most markets been kind of flat.
Mhm.
Obviously there's a huge variation between
Mhm.
markets, but for the most part, there hasn't been much growth as a whole.
Right.
And so, in order to still increase your performance year over year, it's not going to come from additional demand, right? So,
Right.
and supply is still growing as well. So
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
you got to get your additional revenue from basically like improving the way that you operate,
Yep.
either through revenue management or through your marketing or
Mhm.
through adding like more amenities.
Mhm.
One thing that we see a lot is that people are more and more looking for some type of experience versus just renting out a place or just having a place to sleep,
Right.
right? So like amenities is definitely a big focus for some additional revenue,
Mhm.
because if you're able to invest into something that's unique in your market, whether that's like a pickleball court or like a cold plunge
Yep.
or sauna, like those are some things that are really popular right now with the
Yeah.
health and lifestyle trends.
Yep.
And so if you're investing in those type of amenities, you could still like increase your revenue quite a bit by
Absolutely.
doing that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a lot of what you said is everything that's going through my mind this year is one having that conversation with owners sometimes can be difficult about the lows are really low. Obviously, like everyone likes when the highs are high, but getting really competitive in the off season. I just had a meeting with our Verbo rep yesterday, and we had that conversation about how our larger properties in particular, they really struggle in the off season, because we will get some more monthly sort of, we call them snowbirds, folks that come from the Northeast. They want to come down to the South here in South Carolina and kind of escape the snow. It's still pretty cold down here, so it's not that fun to go to the beach or go swimming or anything like that. And prices get pretty low, but you can generally do better with your smaller properties if you're renting it out on a monthly basis. Larger properties, like you said, really a struggle. I mean, 2 years ago, at some of our 5 and 7 bedroom properties, we'd fill in the weekends. We really wouldn't get anything during the week. But these past, I would say this off season and the previous off season, outside of the holidays, Christmas and Thanksgiving, it's been really, really difficult to get any occupancy. So you start thinking, one, from my point of view, these are our best performing properties. So I need to keep them performing in the off season. And yeah, one of those levers you think of is amenities, right? How can we add more amenities that attract more people? A pool heater, right? In the off season, it gets really cold. No one's going to use the pool when it's cold, right? So
Mhm.
adding a pool heater kind of brings the pool as a possibility in the when it gets colder. And can you talk about that a little bit more? Kind of the importance of amenities. That's one thing I'm trying to get across to our owners is that you've got to have some sort of improvement every year. It's not You can't come in with the mindset of I'm going to buy it, I need it to make me money, and then I'll improve it. I think that's a big mistake I
Mhm.
see a lot. Can you talk about the importance of adding amenities, or just tweak? Maybe you have amenities and you just need to, maybe tweak some of the photos or how you advertise, how you market. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and just going back on your point, I know you're in Myrtle Beach, and we're familiar with that market, right? And
Yep.
well, I think one thing that's like kind of hurting as well is that when the snowbirds, a lot of them coming from Canada, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Mm-hmm.
Canadian dollar hasn't been so good. The Canadian
Right.
economy is not so good. So I think a lot of
Yep.
snowboards this winter were like, maybe we stay at home.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, the amenities, there's two sides of it, right? There's
Mm-hmm.
number one is like what amenities are you providing?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important to study your market. As you know, that's a big focus for us.
Mm-hmm.
Is really understanding like what is available in the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many hot tubs are there? How many saunas are there? How many cold plunges? How many
Mm-hmm.
whatever that is, right? How many people have a game room? How many people have like a little gym in the
Mm-hmm.
house, right?
Yep.
How many people have like a simple like pickleball court or like some outdoor activities that you can do. So that's step number one, is really like understanding like what's available in the
Sure.
market.
Mm-hmm.
And then you want to create comp sets in your market to see like, hey, how are properties with a hot tub performing versus non-hot tub properties,
Mm-hmm.
right? How much of a difference is there in revenue?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a pretty broad analysis that you have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, you just kind of have to make a decision, right? Because there's so much data that you can look at.
Yep.
No one can predict the future. So
Right.
you always have to take a little bit of risk and just,
Mm-hmm.
go with your gut feeling,
Mm-hmm.
and try different things, right? I mean, you've got like 70 units, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
or I don't know, 80.
Yep.
I know
Yep.
you're growing pretty fast. So,
Yeah.
it's, that gives you the power to say, you know what, like, let me invest into amenity A for like 10 units and
Mm-hmm.
amenity B for like the other 10 units, and
Mm-hmm.
let's roll with that for like a year and see how
Yep.
that goes, and
Yep.
then you can kind of learn from that.
Yep.
At the short rental forum in Miami where I was last month, people were talking about like really creative ways to create amenities, right?
Mm-hmm.
And because with the demand not really growing or not outpacing the supply growth,
Mm-hmm.
we have to also be careful not raising our expenses too much,
Right.
right? So
Right.
like, for
Yep.
example, hot tub is great, but you also have to think about how much does it cost to service it,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
um, Versus, and how much do you have to invest into that,
Right.
right? Well, one couple creative ideas that I picked up in Miami was for example, if you're going to do cold plunge, you can buy like a really fancy cold plunge, hook it up to electric and everything, but that needs to be serviced as well, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's quite a bit of an investment if you want to do that.
Yep.
But then like one operator that was speaking at the conference was saying like, hey, instead of that, I just bought like a cowboy tub, right? So it's basically just an iron
Mm-hmm.
tub,
Yep.
and I just put water in it, and then I got a commercial ice machine, and then just have my guests like just toss a couple bags of ice in the water, and
Oh wow.
boom, there you have your cold plunge, and
Yeah.
it doesn't cost much. It doesn't cost much to maintain,
Yeah.
but you still have that experience,
Right.
right?
Right. Right.
So it's really thinking creatively of like how can we invest not like a ton of money
Mm-hmm.
that's not gonna create a ton of extra work and a
Mm-hmm.
ton of extra expenses, but
Mm-hmm.
still it contributes to the experience
Yeah.
that people can have,
Yep.
right? I mean, something super easy. Actually, I'm staying here with my brother-in-law here in Miami, and he's got a backyard, and he bought like a pickleball net and a
Mm.
couple rackets,
Yeah.
and so we can actually play pickleball, but you don't have
Mhm.
to build an entire pickleball
Right.
court.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So I think we have to be like really creative in how we approach this.
Yeah.
But I think that's where the opportunity is, like,
Absolutely.
low hanging fruit type of amenities that contribute to the experience, but it's not going to break the bank and add too much work on the operations
Absolutely.
side.
Absolutely. And if that's a mindset you have too of doing that, that can be an advantage, like in a market like I'm in where, as I said, it's a lot of people buy and they don't really do anything unique to it. So I even encourage small stuff like make a little coffee station where you have a nice coffee maker and you've got a few things of, like kind of the syrups or different add-ons you can put in your coffee. There's a little bit of like upkeep there, right? We got to replace them, but there's some operational things we can do with putting, extras in the owner closet or whatnot to keep that
Mm-hmm.
smooth and efficient. But doing something like, even if it's just small, unique, just a little something to put you over the edge versus your neighbor is so key. Is so key. So I couldn't agree more. When you're doing your research, are you looking at? Is it kind of like a combination of maybe you're using some tools like AirDNA and kind of looking at? I know they can put up a graph where you can see how many listings have this amenity, how many listings have this amenity, or are you more so maybe just going to Airbnb directly or some of the other listing sites out there and just
Mhm.
checking on a few different listings, maybe see which one has the top prices, see who seems to be doing good on the occupancy side? What's that? What do you kind of do there?
Yeah, I mean, we usually start with the Price Labs market dashboards.
Gotcha.
You can get a lot of information there. What's nice about the market dashboard of Price Labs is that you can create a comp set using filters. So you can literally, like, in 10 seconds, you can pull a list of all the free bedrooms that have a hot
Mm,
tub.
mm,
And you can download that list to a CSV file and copy paste that in an Excel sheet, which is what
mm,
we usually do. And then it actually has the links already to all the Airbnb listings.
mm,
So that's usually our starting point. Then we calculate like the average, the 70 percentile, 80th percentile, 90th percentile, and the best performing unit in that group, and we compare
mm.
that with the general comp set of like free bedrooms in this case.
Yep.
So that's usually our starting point. Yeah, we get pretty nitty gritty with it. You know, you click on all the Airbnb listings and you're trying to get a feel for, okay, how comparable are these listings? Because you gotta, you know, every listing is unique, right? So you
Mm-hmm.
can look at all all the hot tub listings, but people have a hot tub. The unit's probably going to be on average a little nicer anyway, right?
Right. Right.
So you can't
Right.
just attribute any revenue difference that you see. You can't just attribute that just to the hot tub.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to make an adjustment of like, okay, these units are a little nicer anyway.
Mm-hmm.
They're typically maybe in a better location or whatever
Yep.
that is. And then, you know, by doing that, by going through that process, you can kind of narrow down a little bit more and make a good estimate of how much of that extra revenue is attributed to that amenity that you're looking at.
Right.
So
Yep.
Price Labs market dashboards are first place to go. We do have AirDNA, we do have key data as well to kind of support us, you know, if we need it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's pretty much our process.
I know sometimes I'll look at other markets as well, like Myrtle Beach. Like I look at Scottsdale, they always seem to have just the craziest, Airbnb amenities where it's like you're going to a 6 bedroom house that it's like its own resort. I mean, they've just got it decked out with everything. Do you look at other markets too, and maybe some more like cabin instead of beach markets
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, for sure. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I was just doing some research for a client in St. John's, Newfoundland, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, I looked up like the hot tubs in that city because he's actually trying to make a decision of installing a hot tub or investing into a third bedroom,
Mm.
and so I ran this analysis, and you know, there's only like 10 hot tubs units with 3 bedrooms, or
Right.
even like I think there's only like 10 places with a hot tub in the
Wow.
whole market,
Holy
right?
cow.
So you don't have a lot of data points. So in
Yeah.
that case,
Yeah.
yes, we'd look at some other markets and say like, well, let's look at a similar market and see, you know, how much of a premium does a hot tub demand in that market where we have a little bit more data.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely something that you wanna do if there's not a lot of data points.
Gotcha. Makes sense. On the revenue management side, I know one thing when I started with you guys, we talked a lot about the importance of having a good system for revenue management and then the frequency at which you do it. Can you talk a little bit about why revenue management is important and kind of what to you what revenue management means? I know it can, probably has a lot of different meanings to different people, and
Yeah,
I don't think there's a lot of consistency across the market in terms of how people do it. So, what is it to you?
sure. Yeah, I mean, in general, the way I think about it is very simple. Like, we're trying to maximize revenue,
Hmm.
right? And there's a lot of factors that goes into that. You know, revenue management is very interesting because it's kind of like an art and a science.
Right.
You know, kind of like economics, where
Hmm.
there's data, there's logic, but there's also X factors that you can't calculate,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
there's it's extremely dynamic,
Hmm.
and so that means that you have to learn through experience, right? It's not like mathematics where you can take a book and learn that 1 + 1 is 2.
Right.
No, you have to be in the trenches for a long time to fully like learn and understand like how this stuff works.
Hmm.
And it's very challenging but also very interesting because it's constantly changing. I mean,
Right.
you look at booking windows, for example, right? I
Hmm.
mean, we have some markets where the booking windows collapse by like 20 to 35% compared to last year, right? And
Right.
so if you're not aware of that stuff, then you can make some pretty big mistakes, right?
Hmm.
Because like
Hmm.
we have some clients right now who are like getting nervous about the summer because they were used to getting booked in January and February, right? And now that booking window is shortened, and now people haven't really started booking yet
Right.
in some markets, right? And so
Right.
and that also goes to the owners. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you've got a whole lot of owners, so I'm
Yep.
sure,
Yep.
if the booking window is shrinking, those owners might get a little nervous.
Oh yeah.
So you have to take those things into account as well.
Yep.
We have some units where we're being a little bit more aggressive
Mm-hmm.
than we would be in, from a maximizing revenue perspective, because if our client gets like 25 phone calls every week of like owners that are concerned, that's going to take up time, and that's going to also like create like friction, and that's not
Mm-hmm.
good for the business either, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So there's so many things that you have to take into account when it comes to revenue management. But I
Mm-hmm.
say, some of the most important things are, number one is like, make it part of your daily process.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you have to look at this every day, every booking that comes in, every day there are new data points that can influence your decisions. One booking can influence your decisions, right? And
Right.
and you will have to make some adjustments. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of operators run their own revenue management, but as you know, like, if you got 70 units, like, how much time do you have to focus on revenue management? Right. And it often becomes this thing that you kind of do if you have time,
Mm-hmm.
which is oftentimes you don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
And so it just kind of gets shoved on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And then as a result, the pricing tools just kind of running your revenue management.
Yeah.
And every now and then you might look at it and make some changes, but that's just, in the current competitive climate, that's just not a good strategy anymore. That worked a couple of years ago, but right now that's not working anymore. You got to spend at least, I always recommend, like, spend at least 30 minutes. Just put it in your calendar, every morning or whatever that is. Like, spend 30 minutes, look at your pricing tool, look at your bookings. Mm-hmm. And even if you don't really get a big aha moment, or you don't make any actual changes, just looking at it every day is, you're going to learn, you're going to see trends, you're going to notice things. So that would be my first piece of advice to everybody out there, is like, make this take this serious, make it really part of your daily routine. And then a couple of things that you want to look at is, pacing is one of the most important factors to look at. All right, so what I mean by pacing is how many people are booking, how many units are occupied in your market for certain months, right? So look at February, look at March, look at April, look at May, and see like how much of the market is occupied, and how much are we occupied, right? If you're, for example, you've got 70 units in Myrtle Beach, right? Like, I haven't looked at the Myrtle Beach market in a while, since our other revenue manager Thomas is managing that market. But I do know that like the booking windows is starting for the summer, right? So let's say in Myrtle Beach, you look at July and August, and the market's 30% occupied. If your portfolio is 70% occupied right now, you're probably underpriced, right? So you're getting booked too soon, right? And so that's something that you have to monitor constantly. And you have to take into account the bedroom size there too.
And pacing kind of goes hand in hand with booking window, correct?
100%.
That's one thing. And I actually had Sharky, who's on your team, make me a video explaining the booking window this year, because I get a lot of owners that they think we should be booked up for the summer already, right? They have for some reason they just have this feeling that, hey, I feel like we should be booked up for the summer. But to your point, you need to understand booking windows, because if you don't, then your pricing could be way too cheap for the future. It could be way too high for the present day. If you're not understanding the booking window, which, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of the period where you expect the majority of guests to book, right?
That's right.
Yep.
That's right.
So, and if you don't understand that, how can you really know when to? If you don't understand booking window, how can you know when to adjust prices, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, typically in markets like yours, where 70% of 80% of the money is made in June through August, typically that's a bit of it's always a bit of a nerve-wracking market, because you're so dependent on those couple months. And so the owners are focused on the summer. You as an owner, business owner, are focused on the summer. And typically, people who don't have professional revenue managers that understand the pacing, typically people would book up too early, right? Because it feels good to have stuff on the books. And so typically people are biased towards like getting bookings early on. And so, people obviously book the more attractive competitively priced properties first,
Mm-hmm.
right? So those properties get scooped up first. So yeah, it's nice to have some occupancy on the books, but you don't really want to be that person that that has the units that offering like the deals for the
Yeah.
summer, because the
Yeah.
summer gets like, in your market, the summer gets like 85% occupancy,
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
there's not going to be much left. So
Yeah.
you don't even have to be too aggressive bringing your prices down either, because there's just so much demand that almost the entire market will book up.
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to this stuff, I think it's it's all about education, especially
Mm-hmm.
with your owners. Like, you got to let your owners know, like, hey, listen, like, they don't understand booking window necessarily, so
Yeah.
you have to word it in a way that they understand
Mm-hmm.
it, of just saying like, hey, the trend is that people are booking later and later. We can get you booked now, but we're gonna have to like get book at a lower price
Yeah.
point. And it's more optimal to wait a little bit longer, and because the majority of people still have to book, right?
Yeah.
So explaining that ahead of time, because yeah, I totally get you. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we for example, the
Mm-hmm.
some of the ski markets, the booking window collapsed over the winter, the
Yeah.
last couple months.
Yeah.
And so yeah, everyone was October, September, everyone's nervous of like, where are the bookings for the ski season?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. So
Yeah.
I think it's all about education there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I love your point about just jumping into it and learning as you go. It's not You're not jumping into it and just making a ton of mistakes, but get into it, as soon as you get started, and don't let the pricing tool just dictate what your prices are all throughout the year. Get in there, adjust some things. There's usually a lot of those like Price Labs. They'll have good, decent training videos educating you on the basics of how to use it and some of the basic metrics to track. So I love your point about that. Another thing is promotions. That was one thing I really wasn't doing beforehand, or rather utilizing the promotions and kind of merchandising you can do on Airbnb, right? Between length of stay and last minute discount and early bird special. How do you recommend folks utilize those, and is it important to use those? Does that affect how your listing performs and kind of ranks?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the OTAs like Booking.com, Verbo doesn't have too many different options that you can do outside of like weekly, monthly discounts. But
Mm-hmm.
Airbnb and Booking.com have a ton of little tools and discounts that you can use.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a reason that those platforms have those tools, right?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't develop those tools for us not to use them,
Yep.
right? There's a reason that these tools are out there, and it makes sense. Like, people want to get a deal,
Mm-hmm.
like, I challenge you to go on Booking.com and book a hotel without getting a discount. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're always getting some type of discount,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so we're so used to that if I go on Airbnb or Booking.com and I'm looking to book a place and there's no discount, it almost feels like, all right, I'm overpaying.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not getting a discount,
Yeah.
right?
And you see
But
this everywhere, right? You don't just see this in hotels and accommodations. You see this everywhere in life. You go to the grocery
yeah,
store, they've got those little tags between every, like 3 or 4 items that say sale dashed out $3.99. It's only $2.99. You see it everywhere.
exactly, exactly. And what's interesting is that if you're not using OTA specific discounts, but you're just like using your pricing tool to discount,
Mm-hmm.
then you're giving a discount. Then you're basically the supermarket that doesn't put any price tags on
Mm-hmm.
on the items that are for sale. So the bananas, let's say they were $4 and now they're $2. They just put $2. They don't
Mm-hmm.
put like the strike through of the four.
Mm-hmm.
And so to a new customer, they wouldn't even realize that the bananas are half price.
Right.
They just see that they're $2.
Right.
And that's what we're doing if we're discounting on the pricing tool.
Yep.
So I go on Airbnb and I book a unit. If there's no discount on the OTA, then I'm going to assume that's just the price, right?
Mm-hmm.
I have no
Mm-hmm.
idea that the operator just put a 50% discount in Price Labs,
Mm-hmm.
because I just see that one price.
Right.
Right. So it's, yeah. And that's why it's important to use these OTA specific discounts, because otherwise you're giving a discount, but you're not getting a marketing benefit
Mm-hmm.
and the conversion boost from the discount
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. I mean, obviously the lower your price, the more visibility you get, so the bigger the chance that somebody books. But, you got to leverage, especially now, like it's so competitive out there. You got to leverage every lever you can pull. You got to pull
Mm-hmm.
it, because otherwise, like the next door operator is going to do it,
Yeah.
and you're losing out.
Yep, absolutely. And Airbnb, right? They have a ton of data. So why would they offer something like that if they didn't think it would be effective or they didn't want you to use it, right? And I think this also kind of leads well into the next point. You guys made a great guide on and had a little webinar on how to optimize your Airbnb listing as far as little tweaks you can make just to make sure you're taking advantage of all the kind of features and little marketing things you can add to your listing to really attract guests and convert guests. What are some of those top things that you can do on your listings to help it perform and optimize better?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, to start, like make sure you have a completed listing. And what I mean by a completed listing is that you've actually like filled out every single aspect of the listing, right? And just that will put you in the top 10% of hosts,
Yep.
because almost no one takes the time to fully optimize their listing. So there's little details that are usually overlooked. There's amenities that you can where you can specify like what type of amenity. Like for example, you can put TV, but you can actually edit that, and you can actually say like, hey, we have a 55-inch TV, and we have Netflix, and we have Hulu, and we have Paramount, or whatever it is, right? You can specify and add so much detail to your listing now, which a whole lot of hosts are not doing that. And so just by doing that, you're going to stand out, right? So I encourage everybody, if you're listening to this, like after this podcast, go into your Airbnb listing and just literally go section by section and see if there's anywhere where it says like add details and there's nothing there, like add something. Because Airbnb keeps track of that. They keep track of like to what extent is this listing complete. If you have an incomplete listing, then they know it's going to not convert as good. So they're not going to show you to as many people.
Yep, absolutely. And I think one of the other cool tidbits on that guide was the categories section and how there's actually a site you can go to request to be added or I think removed from different categories. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's funny. You know how in marketing everybody always talks about secrets.
Yeah.
And I always I'm always hesitant to say like, oh
yeah,
it's a secret, because like it's kind of it's kind of BS. But this is the only time secret. I will say like, what, this is kind of like a legit secret, because like literally like almost nobody knows this. Airbnb also like they don't really announce changes very often. I mean, they do with the summer update and the winter update. But they're constantly making changes, and if you're not on top of it, like you're not even going to know. But this is one of the things that you can find this on their website, but you got to dig and you got to really look, know where to look to find this. But yeah, there's a website that's called elevate.translated.com. And I don't know where they got that name, but essentially like you can log in using your Airbnb credentials, and then you can request categories. And most people don't know this. Most people think that the categories are automatically assigned by Airbnb by an algorithm, which is true. But you can go into Airbnb and say like, hey, this category doesn't make sense. Remove this one, but put me in these other two, right? And if you make it clear in your listing that you should be in those categories through your photos and descriptions, right? Like if you have like an amazing kitchen, like you should be in the chef kitchens category. If you're not in the category, make sure you have some really good pictures of your kitchen. Put in the caption like, this kitchen you can cook like a chef, something like that. And then the rep that's going to review your request is going to look at that picture and be like, oh yeah, okay, this definitely does look like a chef kitchen, right? And they're going to approve it.
Yeah. In our market, we have I think a little over 17,000 listings between North Myrtle and Myrtle Beach. We just got a ton. So the benefit of getting in those categories is you go from a search with thousands of listings to now you're in a search with maybe hundreds, right? Depending on the category. So it can really, really help you kind of get your listing more views and ultimately hopefully more bookings. So that's a great little tidbit. And I'll put that in the description of this episode so everyone can check it out. But I would definitely recommend doing what Jasper mentioned. Cool deal. I know we're running low on time here. So last thing I wanted to end on I always love learning. What are your top 3 resources? It could be a book, it could be podcast, people, technology, conferences. What do you think? Top 3 things that come to mind for folks looking to get a little bit more educated on SDRs.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I would say podcasts are great
Mm-hmm.
because you can consume them while you're doing something else, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can go to the, go to the gym, or when you're driving, you put up a podcast, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's so many podcasts out there now. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you've got your podcast,
Mm-hmm.
my podcast will get paid for your pad. There's a whole bunch of other ones as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's another podcast. Thanks for visiting,
Yep.
which is really good.
Good. Yeah.
But yeah, there's a whole wide range of them. So I would say like just Google like Airbnb podcast or something like that, and
Mm-hmm.
just pick a few and
Mm-hmm.
just make it a habit. When you don't have anything else to do really, or you're doing something where you can listen,
Mm-hmm.
just listen to a podcast every day. You'll
Mm-hmm.
over time you'll just learn so much, and it's free. You don't have to pay for it, so
Mm-hmm.
it's good. Number 2, I think, is be part of a community.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be part of a community. You can't rely on just yourself trying to figure everything out.
Mm-hmm.
The short-term rental business is so complicated in the sense that you gotta wear so many different hats.
Yeah.
You gotta be good at operations, marketing,
Mm-hmm.
guest communications,
Mm-hmm.
customer service,
Yeah.
revenue management. Right? There's
Yep.
so many different hats that you can't not rely on yourself to figure everything out. So
Yep.
be part of a community, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of my mentors once told me, be the hub, not the spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I started my own podcast. I wrote my own book. I have my
Mm-hmm.
own. We have our own mastermind. That you're part
Mm-hmm.
of.
Mm-hmm.
So like if you can, I would say start your own community thing,
Mm-hmm.
whether that's a mastermind, a local meetup, or whatever
Mm-hmm.
that is. If not, join a
Yep.
community.
Yep.
Right? There's all these masterminds. There's all these groups out there that you can join.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be the second thing, and then the third thing, I would say, we have some really good resources available for anybody listening right now on the topic of revenue management.
Mm-hmm.
We have a website called Foundry.com, and Wyld spelled with a Y. We have some some free courses. We have some free resources. The checklist that you just mentioned. Our goal of our philosophy is we try to help people with anything in their business. We focus on revenue management, as you know, but we have a ton of resources because we've done a lot of courses and masterminds in the past where we can support you on other sides of the business. And most of that, we don't charge for it. We only charge for our revenue management service. And we have a revenue management course that comes with a mastermind membership that's paid.
Yeah.
Everything else is basically, we're just, we're giving it away for free. So check out our website, join our email list, and we're always sending out, resources that you can get for free.
Yeah, absolutely. I love community, and the other nice thing about community is it can be a stressful, dealing with guests. Sometimes dealing with some homeowners. Sometimes it can be a stressful, thing. So also being in a community to just remind yourself that you're not crazy and everyone else is going through these things is also a great aspect.
Yeah.
And when I was, like I said, when I was getting started, I could not find any resource to save my life on revenue management. So I think this episode had a lot of good tidbits, and again, checking out Wyld for some more information on that is invaluable. So good stuff. Is there any kind of closing here? Anything else you want to shout out or have folks go to or reach out if they want to get in touch with you somehow?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, the Wyld Foundry website is really the hub for people to go for revenue management advice. Feel free to reach out to me personally, Jasper at Wyld.com. If you have any questions, like we do actually respond to emails from random people that reach out to us. Usually we'll just point them to a free resource that we have available. So yeah, feel free to get in touch with us. We love helping and supporting the community.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Jasper. Like I said, I think this was a great episode, and hopefully we can do another one in the future. But to everyone else, I hope you enjoyed. If there's anything you want me to go over or do a podcast on in the future, just put in the comments below and give this a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks, guys.
Peace. Thanks, guys.